Okay, so thank you to everyone for your interest in the webinar today. This is the fifth webinar that the Think Tank Initiative has put on since September, and the aim of these bi-weekly webinars is to allow us to easily engage and share with presenters and with each other on a range of topics. And we have three formats for the webinars. The first has been practically driven, which is the format that we've had for all previous webinars, which included presentations on Google Analytics, search engine optimization, Google applications, and accessing data through the Think Tank Initiative database. The second format is topic-driven, which will provide a space for a more spontaneous discussion amongst many participants on a particular topic. And this will be the format for our webinar in 2 weeks' time, where we'll have a discussion on what a post-MDG development agenda might look like. And the final format that we have is author or guest speaker driven, and this is the format we have today, as Ahmed will be presenting some research findings. Ahmed Rashid is the Research Award recipient for the Think Tank Initiative, and before joining IDRC, Ahmed worked as the Research and Communications Officer for the Embassy of Switzerland and Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation in Bangladesh, where he was responsible for a wide range of research and communications activities. He was also a program specialist for the USAID-funded Local Government Initiative Project, where he monitored grantee projects, conducted perception surveys, and organized capacity-building workshops. Ahmed has a master's degree in public and international affairs from the University of Ottawa. And since January, Ahmed has been a research awardee with us at the Think Tank Initiative, where he's been extremely helpful in providing all kinds of program support, and he has also managed to complete 2 research projects, where most research awardees only complete one. One is on patterns of donor engagement with think tanks in Bangladesh, and one that we will now hear a presentation on media think tank relations in Bangladesh. So without further ado, I will pass the ball over to Ahmed.
Thanks, Katie. So as you've heard from Katie, the topic of my presentation is media think tank relations, and this topic is interesting for me partly from my experience of working with journalists. So I thought it would be really interesting to get their perspectives on how they see media and think tank interactions and engagements. And obviously, I used some of the context that I had when I was working in Bangladesh for several years for the Swiss Embassy. The outline of my presentation is the following. First, I'll briefly touch on the objectives of the study. Then,
Ahmed,
yes.
Have you shared the presentation with us? I can't see it.
It's on my screen.
Did you click share my desktop?
Oh, sorry. Yes. Sorry about that.
No problem. There we go.
Sorry.
Yeah. Now I can see it.
Sorry about that. Anyway, this is the topic of my presentation: the dynamics of media think tank relations, and obviously Bangladesh is the case that I'm looking at. Are you all able to see the desktop now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So this is the outline of the presentation, objectives of the study first. Then I briefly touch upon the methodology that I used. Then a framework of this interaction between media and think tanks, which emerged from literature review. I have 5 key findings that I could draw on based on the data that I have collected, and some concluding remarks and recommendations, and obviously some emerging questions from the study that I found. The main objective of the study is to get the perspectives of media on their engagement with think tanks. My literature search has found that, well, there has been some literature, some research done on media think tank relations. Most of these look at from the perspective of the think tanks. For example, James McGann did a study on media relations. There are other authors who have done that, but I thought it would be really interesting to hear from the media, the journalists themselves, on what they think on what kind of information they want from think tanks, what kind of relations think tanks are trying to build with them, and several other perspectives. And the other objective is obviously to see how these perspectives can inform the think tank strategies to enhance media engagements, particularly. So what they're seeking, what they're looking in terms of information, in terms of analysis, how they're looking for this information, and how these possibly will help think tanks craft strategies to better engage with media. So my methodology was, first I reviewed literature. Most of the literature is focused on North American context, some European as well, but there is hardly any literature on this topic per se in the developing countries. That was a bit of a challenge. I had two modalities of data collection. Firstly, I had a structured questionnaire, which had around 17 questions, mostly Likert scale type of question and answers. I had 57 respondents, and these respondents were mainly journalists from mainstream media in Bangladesh. So here you see a breakdown of the respondents. Obviously, this represents the kind of the total population of the journalists, roughly. And television channel and the newspaper being the two major affiliations of the respondents. In terms of gender distribution, it was 88-12 male-female ratio. And there is a distribution in terms of experience of journalists. It's roughly, I divided between senior journalists, mid-career journalists, and junior journalists. So it's also roughly representing the total population. In addition to that, I had 8 key informal interviews, 4 with senior journalists, 2 media experts, including one journalist professor, and 2 think tank communication staff. This was mainly done to complement some of the findings quantitative data that I'm gathering from the survey. All right. This framework of mutual intensity that I term it sounds very simplistic in many ways, but the basic framework is that media and think tanks have several mutual incentives to engage with each other. From think tanks' perspective, the main incentive is to get visibility, to inform wider public or reach the target audiences through media. So kind of acting as a multiplier effect for the research findings and other advocacy initiatives. And from the media's perspective, the incentive is to understand policy debates, among other things. So basically, media will draw on expertise of the think tanks to understand issues, to get comments from them, so that they are presented to their audiences. But there are several dimensions to this, and this is not value free. This is often fraught with tension. This framework of mutual engagements. And some of the literature reflect on that. For example, a recent Weaver study looked at how think tanks absolutely need to have media relations to disseminate their activities, to have a greater stake in the policy discussions. Ahmed, for example, another author who is writing in a US context, his study found that the typology of think tank matters on how they engage with media. For example, a more advocacy-oriented think tank, his study found, are more able to engage with media better than some maybe purely academic-focused think tanks. Abels and Wiedenbaum in their studies find that media engagement has significant evaluative elements, because media citations, media appearances for interviews, they will often be often evaluated in terms of influence, measuring influence of think tanks. There was an interesting study by Wheeler, Krebs, and others on ideology. So he was looking at, again, U.S. context and saying that, well, there's an obvious linkage between the ideology, the think tank, who's obviously in U.S. context conservative and liberal parties, and how these think tanks engaged more closely with similarly aligned media. And vice versa. Media who is aligned to one political ideology seems to draw more on resources from think tanks from particular ideology. So this is from think tanks perspective. Obviously, these engagements also vary depending on the stage of the policy cycle. So think tank engagement will be different when in agenda setting stage. And it will be different than when during implementation stage of the policy. So there are various dynamics in place. From media's perspective, some authors write that media's engagement is very much dependent on the relevance of the products that think tanks are producing, their utility. So, for example, media will draw on think tank expertise when there's an event happening, the budget has been announced, or there's a trade agreement to be signed soon. So they will draw on think tank expertise when there is a need, and obviously when there is a convenience. So think tanks media will approach think tanks who are more approachable, reachable, who are more media friendly, and so convenience. And Haas's paper actually outlines that quite well. Megan writes that media tends to, due to the nature of the media nowadays, 24/7 media cycles, often this engagement is kind of superficial examination of issues. So a think tank executive director is called and or asked to come to the media outlet and comment on something in 30 seconds. So as a soundbite. So there's a danger that he notes that there's often complex issues are represented in a very simplified way, which can be dangerous in some instances and can undermine think tanks' credibility. All right. So I jump to the major findings from my study. So this is the first finding is that I found that independent and government-affiliated think tanks are the key source of information for journalists. So the question was, what type of institutions and organizations the journalists reach to when you're looking for information on different subjects. And as you can see, independent think tanks has the highest. This is on a scale of from 1 to 5. So 1 being not at all, and 5 being very often. And independent think tanks get the high score, and somewhat surprising, the 3 point. Government think tanks are also useful for tracking. And this echoes with the policy community survey findings that was done in 2011 by Think Tank Initiative, where independent think tanks also came out as the main source of information for analysis and other purposes. But the other aspect of this came out from the key informal interviews is that even though the, journalists think that think tanks are one of the main sources of information, the perspective was that these varies from topic to topic. So and there was a perspective that there is a predominance of macroeconomy and economy-based think tanks, and not so much in other areas. For example, terrorism or security. For example, these issues. So it very much varies on its usefulness as a source, varied from team to team. Second finding was that here I was kind of testing my hypothesis on how journalists perceive think tanks' role. So the question, if you see on the graph on your left, was the respondents here could select only one answer. So the idea was not to idea was to get their perspective on what they see as the most critical function of think tanks, to understand how their perception or conception of think tanks. So what is striking was that contrary to some of the literature, which to kind of a association between advocacy think tanks and advocacy role of think tanks and media presence, my research found that majority of the journalists think that research function is still the most critical function. So over 50% said that research is the main consideration when turning to think tanks, for example. But at the same time, I've only put two graphs here, but there are other graphs that also kind of delve deeper into the issue. But there is a sense emerging from the findings, from the data, that journalists consider research quality as the main criteria for them to approach a think tank. So they will consider this as the most critical one. During the key informant interviews, obviously issues of reliability and credibility came up, but also extent of research. So, for example, one respondent, key informant, told me that, well, rigorous research or very methodologically sound research is interesting, it's credible, it's good, but as journalists, we are interested in kind of national level issues that we can generalize, and that is more relevant for our readers. So these are important considerations. So now, in the following set of questions, I try to understand the type of engagement between think tanks and media, and obviously think tanks engage with media in various forms and various ways, and the idea is to get a sense of how they're engaging with that. So my data shows that from the journalist perspective, they're more kind of attending seminars, and this is again on a scale of 1 to 5, and higher score denoting occurred more often. And this is interesting because if you see the figures, the highest type of engagement, if I may call that, was attending seminars and visiting the website of the think tank to gain information. And the striking finding is that only read a published report or policy briefs is very low. So the reports or the analysis that think tanks are producing, the policy briefs that are producing, journalists acknowledge that not many of them are reading those. And this emerged strongly from the informant interviews when I discussed with journalists, is that time is an issue for journalists. They don't have time to read a published report. More often than not, they don't have time. And for doing a story, writing a commentary or reporting on an event, they are more likely to visit the website of the think tank rather than read 10-page reporting. Conducting an interview is obviously specific to each media organization, but more striking finding is that there's a difference of how they're engaging with think tanks. My fourth finding is that from the think tank's perspective, how they are trying to engage with media. And the findings show that think tanks are often inviting journalists to attend conferences, seminars, other discussion debates. But compared to that, think tanks are less likely to build or try to build long-term relations with them. And examples of think tanks inviting journalists for attending training on different topics is much less likely. So my finding is that think tanks are often engaging with media with a rather short-term perspective. So, for example, this I heard from several journalists also during key informative interviews that think tanks are really focused on getting coverage of a particular event, for example. So they're happy that the event is being presented in the newspaper or the television channel, but they're less likely to or try to build kind of longer-term relationship with the journalists. And also some other perspectives came up. For example, there was a perception that some think tanks are more engaging with particular media and not trying to build a wider base of networks within media. So that is affecting their credibility as well. Another issue came up was the sense of timing. So timing in a sense of issue selection. So think tanks are saying that, well, research may be really relevant for the country's context, really good research, but at that particular time, media is not interested because it's not in the agenda of the political parties or it's not discussed. So the perspective was that if think tanks can anticipate some of the issues that are more interesting for them, it's easier to engage with media and get their interest. Another perspective was that, and this came out from the informal interviews mainly, was that many of the think tanks lacked understanding of how media functions. So what I mean by that is that how media functions from very minute details of when journalists report to their editors, when they're holding meetings. For example, I was talking to journalists that one think tank invited them to a program at 5 p.m. in the evening, and which is not ideal for the journalist because he was saying that I have to attend this program at 5, and my deadline for submitting my paper is 9. So it's very difficult for me to have a good representation of what happened in the program. So overall, the think tanks' public media relation efforts, from journalist perspective at least, seem that there are room for improvements. Another perspective which I found in terms of engagement between think tanks and media is that some media, some of the leading media in Bangladesh, are undertaking their own policy-relevant research. And this is relatively new phenomena, but I was astounded with the level of research and the extent of research that some media are doing, and they are outsourcing many of their really policy-relevant topics. For example, when I was in Dhaka in June, one leading newspaper was organizing a dialogue based on a survey that was outsourced to a private company, and they invited ministers, just like a think tank would conduct a survey and present to the minister, for example. So I thought that this was an interesting dynamic that was emerging, and media saying that, well, we are doing many of the things that think tanks are doing. So maybe there are new avenues of collaboration or emerging. These these two graphs are relevant to the previous finding and supports the notion that when think tanks are trying to build a stronger relationship with media, capacity building events and trainings could be one way to do that. This not only contributes to the enhancement of journalist capacity, but it has a strong spin-off effect in terms of building stronger relations. So obviously, you can see that there's a strong agreement that think tanks can organize and invite journalists to many of the training on thematic areas. For example, this came up. It can be thematic training on macroeconomic, training on health policy. It can be journalistic training, but it can be also training on how research is done. And this came up quite strongly in the informal interviews. For example, many of the journalists I met, for example, are reporting on economy, reporting on budget, but many of them don't have that background. So there are still many opportunities for capacity building by think tanks for journalists. These I put because I found it really interesting that using social media to engage with journalists, and there is a significant and quite strong agreement that think tanks should use social media. And this, from my experience, I know that the journalist friends I have, they are always on Facebook, Twitter, following news. So research findings, at least in Bangladesh context, I found that it's missing. Many of the leading think tanks in Bangladesh don't have Facebook accounts. So, and this all clearly journalists use social media to get information, to find interesting new things, and this perspective is clear and strongly emerging. My last finding is with regard to the political and ideological issues that affect this interface between think tanks and media. Obviously, journalists demonstrated that they are very much aware of what positions that each think tanks are holding. And it was striking to me from the exchanges that I have that from their perspective, they're by profession very critical of things that go around them, and very critical of any of the dynamics that affect think tanks' work. For example, which think tank is aligned to which ideology or which political party, or perception that there are a lot of donor reliance and the donors are affecting some of the research and what they can research on, things like that. But at the same time, if you place this finding with the earlier finding that think tanks are one of the main source of information for them, so perception is that even if they are sometimes skeptical of the findings or the activities of think tanks, they are still and they are very much aware of the constraints think tanks have. They are still one of the main sources of information for them. So recommendations. These are and just to note that I have highlighted only a few of the graphs and the findings, and there are other findings if that are interesting as well. And the recommendations that are quite general and may seem very obvious, but I thought that there is a strong evidence that from the data that I collected that provide these directives or these impressions. So for my experience and the data, it seemed that it's very important to have a communications staff that will manage the relations with media, particularly given that media has, at least in Bangladesh, proliferated significantly. Their importance in the policy cycles have grown. It is critical to have dedicated media staff. And what I found was that often media would have very close relations with the top executive, like the AD or the main researcher or the research head who is presenting often. But it's the communication officers, even if they are communication officers working in think tanks, they're often not kept in the loop. So I think for institutional stronger institutional linkages between media and think tanks, communication staff needs to be engaged in this process. The other finding was that other recommendation is that there should be effort to have a broader base of media engagements instead of obviously think tank tends to build stronger relationship with more widely published or more popular media. But I think the stance was that from journalists that this focus on certain media does not fare well when they are trying to build a broader base of media engagement. And these are reflected, and this was found in the data that I collected, was that think tanks should have a clear understanding of how media functions and what are media needs and requirements. For example, if you're and this came up from an interview that if I am handed in a 20-page report in a dissemination event, and if I don't have a one-pager media flair that highlights the key findings, it's very difficult for me to for a journalist to do anything with that. And more often than not, this report will not be unread. So small things like how to relate the findings to the context and having that mindset of how a journalist would approach this information and how he could use that and this will inform many of the things or strategies that think tanks can adopt in terms of engaging effectively with journalists. Yes. Obviously, maintaining website, it's clear think tanks, the media are more likely to go to visit the website of the think tank to find information. And if relevant, I think social media should be introduced. More and more journalists, if not majority of the journalists, are on social media, and this is one important way that think tanks can flag their findings or research. So this is more, the next recommendation is more going into the detail of how they can plan media events, and this I reflected on before. There should be awareness of how media can be engaged. If this is the objective of the research findings, to have wider dissemination, it should be done at the beginning, at the planning stage of how we can engage with media. When can we disseminate it? How can media be engaged more? And this was the last recommendation that was strongly emerging as well, that there is an opportunity, if it's relevant, the different kinds of capacity building events that think tanks are organizing, media can be included as an important stakeholder in that. And this can be thematic or thematic training or other type of training that not only helps the capacity of the journalists but also fosters stronger relationship. Emerging questions, and this is my last slide. While my research did reflect on some of the things, I thought that there are some interesting or emerging questions. For me, there is an opportunity for working on the demand side of the research and expertise. So if this is a broader question, I know, but think tanks can think about how to create demand for research analysis. So media, obviously, and this will facilitate their stronger engagement with media. The second emerging question is that, at least in Bangladesh context, I found that there is tremendous growth of media, not only in terms of numbers, but also in terms of their importance. And their stake in the policy discussion. In the last 12 months, 12 new television channels opened up. There are reportedly 24 channels more that are waiting to get the permission of the government. So this is a tremendous, given that the total number of, and this is a recent phenomenon. To understand these dynamics, to understand who is behind what corporate interest lies behind this media, that particular media, and these are important issues for think tanks to understand, and dedicated communication staff with knowledge and expertise on media issues should be dealing with that. Given that many of the issues that think tanks are dealing with are very close to the political circles and political discussions. And the last time reflection I had was the fact that as more and more media, especially the leading media, are conducting their own research, how does this affect think tanks? Are there opportunities for complementarity? Are there opportunities for collaboration emerging from this? So this is my presentation. Thank you for your attention. I don't know, are you there?
Yes.
Yes.
I think we're all here. Thanks very much, Ahmed. That was really interesting.
I took more time than I should have, maybe.
No, that's fine. Yeah, I think a lot of what you were saying was also reflected in the some of the discussions at the Think Tank Initiative Exchange in Cape Town when we got the some African think tanks and African media in a room to discuss some of these issues, especially around training and social media. One journalist said, "You must be on Twitter all the time." So yeah, it's interesting to see those issues coming out in Africa and Bangladesh. We had Samar and Stephen join us. I know you both sort of joined about halfway through, maybe. I think we'll open up the floor to questions now for Ahmed. So if you have a question, you can just go ahead and speak. I had muted some of you, but I've unmuted you now. Or you can use the chat box. So go ahead.
Okay. Can you hear me? I'm Samar Rai.
Yes. Hello, Samar.
Hello.
Hi,
Yes, I'm Samar Rai. I'm here. And definitely, thanks to all of you who actually given me the opportunity to join this type of new experience. So, and this is a very, very fruitful and very interesting, because I found that the presentation of Mr. Ahmed is very interesting, and this is in terms of the Bangladesh. If you're considering the Bangladesh, it is a new sort of research area. He tried his best to do his work. So that is very important, very interesting. But if you look this research in terms of the practical aspects of both parties, the think tank and the media. So if the thrust of the research is to develop the linkage between the two parties, am I right or not? I don't know at this moment, because I joined there halfway of your discussion. So, but whatever I try to understand, that the thrust of the research or objective of the research to find out the ways how to develop the linkage between the two parties, the think tanks and the media. Okay? Broadly. And he tried to address the broad issues, and it's a broad-based research work. So that is actually the thing. But if we consider the practical or if we can understand the practical aspects of the media here actually the media people are not interested to learn anything. I'm trying to explain these things. Because of why? Because there is absence of the qualitative competition, the quality product competition. So if even he is not getting reward from the there is no way to give him the reward on the qualitative products, on the basis of the quality products. So this is the basic thing. If you're talking about the training for the journalists, it is a very tough job for here, because if anybody is not interested to learn anything for his own capacity building, it is difficult to give him that training. Okay? One thing, this is from my own experience. I spent in the area around more than 2 decades. So, and both development fields, and still I am in the middle of the development field and in the media. And what are actually think tanks doing here? Think tanks are trying to pursue their own agenda to the media. So that is, and they're trying to actually raise their own issue, not in terms of the need of the media. So there is no initiative to develop a bridge between the media and the think tanks, because the think tanks are not ready or are not working to develop the media people capacity, because think tanks are very much focus-based knowledgeable people, but the media people are a sort of broad-based knowledge. They sort of superficial knowledge people. Those who are working at that superficial, they don't have that. They don't have the capacity to see anything in a very specific way. So this is actually the scenario. So and if the competition if the competitiveness among the media houses not in terms of the quality products, so how can you generate the interest among the media people to gather knowledge? That is very challenging. So,
yeah, I think your point is very well taken, and these findings emerged from my study, that the journalists were very self-critical, especially the senior journalists, of the level of the media capacity. And they see a tremendous deterioration of general quality of journalism. And the word you mentioned, the superficial representation of issues, and this seems to be happening as with the sudden proliferation of media. So that there are more positions for journalists opening up, and there are not enough qualified people interested to join those. Take up these positions of journalism. So this is an issue that came up, and think tanks I think have had a role to play, even when they're pursuing their research. They're very much knowledge focused, think focused, but there can be a bridge between these two. I think, and my research certainly found that. For example, one respondent told me that the main contribution of think tanks in Bangladesh is that they have enhanced the habit of reading for journalists. So they don't have they don't have many sources which they can draw on, but think tanks are producing papers that they are sometimes reading at least. So these are issues that definitely.
Yes, very interesting thing. So if you are talking about the products produced by the think tanks, and the journalists are trying to actually go through this literature or something like this. But here is another big challenge, because the level of understanding. The think tanks are producing their products according to their own standard, according to their level of understanding. Not they're considering the level of understanding of the other parts of the people. So there is a gap between the level of understanding. So if it's a product, if I'm not I'm not the, I don't have the capacity to read or to understand this product, so it is meaningless. Or sometimes, and that is a approach that is approach by the intentionally, sometimes intentionally doing by the think tanks, because they are not they are always giving some information for and taking their credits. That they are the authority to, they are the only authority to give that type of comments or that type of inputs to the media. So they are not interested to enhance the capacity of the media people, that media can analyze or can develop or can produce those products, those who they can. So this is sort of a very, very interesting thing here. So, and it's a very big, yes.
Sorry,
yes.
I'm just going to have to stop you. This is all very interesting. I think you and Ahmed could have a one-on-one discussion after too, if necessary. I'm aware that Enrique has raised his hand, so he's got a question. I'm going to let him jump in here before we run out of time. So Enrique, over to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ahmed, for the presentation. I think you helped make a stronger case for the recommendations that are already the kind of recommendations that we hear and we always make to think tanks. And I think it's a good thing that you're looking at this from the point of view of the media rather than the think tanks, because it helps to put things into perspective. I'll plug work that has been done in Latin America looking at the media. And I'm happy to forward you some of the stuff. But we edited a book a year ago looking at media and think tanks relationships, and there's quite a lot of work that Laura Stormed in Argentina has done on this. That confirms much of what you say. But I think it's difficult because we can't generalize everything from a single country, but also we cannot generalize when we talk about the media. And I think we probably need to, if we're going to look at this from the perspective of the media, I think it would be interesting, maybe it's in your study, but we should look at the media in much more detail. And I think we should look at it at different levels. So there's a level of the business. There is the media. Sometimes I feel that in the development sector, the media is treated as another development actor. But in fact, the media is a business. And it has its own agency and its own interests, and its own needs. And so we should think about the media that way, and we should study the media in that way. The second is that not all media businesses are the same. Right? Some media businesses are targeting a general public. Some of them are, of course, more broadsheet. Some of them are tabloidy. Some of them are specialized, and there are many examples in our team in Bangladesh. Certainly, I know from much more of this in Latin America. There are many examples of specialized magazines or newspapers that focus on key policy issues, economics, etc. So, for example, if you want nuanced discussion of think tank reports, go to the Financial Times in the UK, or go to Semana Económica in Peru or in Chile. Don't go to the broadsheets that are targeting everybody, because you're not going to get that. But that's okay, because that's not their role. In the same way, I would say that not all journalists or media people are the same. There are journalists whose job is to go from one story to another, and the editor decides what that journalist does. And there are journalists who specialize. And I would say that in the more developed media sector, businesses, you will find more specialized journalists than you would find in poorer, newer, less developed media sectors, of course, because there's less capacity or there isn't a big audience. So I think we need to look at those levels and differences of the types of businesses, the sectors, the audiences, the type of journalists, because then think tanks need to start thinking more about the media, less as a as a conduit of their research, or an organization or a group of people that the think tanks can use to a group or an organization that is likely to use them. There's a journalist in Peru, Nicolau, who gave a presentation once, and he talked about this, saying the question posed to him was, how can think tanks use the media? And he said, that's never going to happen. The media is always going to use you. The media is stronger than you, so you've got to understand it. You've got to know their game, understand their business. And I think that would be quite interesting set of questions to delve into, to try to study the media in much more detail. Not necessarily asking about the role of think tanks, just to really give think tanks information about the media, which is, whatever you say by suggesting you need dedicated staff to target the media more strategically. What I think tanks need is that information that they don't necessarily have. And this is the last thing I'll say, is that some of that has been done in Latin America. I'm happy to pass it on, and maybe I can pitch for TTI to help translate some of the chapters. But there are other in Spanish. It might be interesting to look at how we can get some of these stories out there.
Yeah, thanks for this. And these some of this emerged from my interviews as well, data. For example, there seems to be, at least according to my respondents, there is a huge difference between on these questions between how print media functions and how electronic media. So the perception was that for print media, think tanks work and their analysis is more relevant than electronic media. And these are one of the many different nuances that you mentioned, that the heterogeneity of the media landscape has to be taken into account. Absolutely.
So can I just say something? This is interesting. Before I forget, you mentioned something about media converging into think tanks or converging with think tanks. And I think that's something that is happening. I think it's clear. You see it everywhere. But actually, what's more interesting is that, in fact, at their origin, the media, the parties, and the think tanks, in a way, were also similar. They're all kind of mixed together. The Economist originally is a campaign to prevent the passing of corn laws in the UK. And in a way, it was set up like a mini think tank. It was doing some analysis and research and advocating for change. And then it decided it would be better off as a publication. So the history of think tanks and especially specialized publications or political publications is it's tight, it's close.
Yes.
So that is an interesting thing that's happening now with new technologies, but it's been happening in different ways for a very long time, and that's another interesting set of research.
Well, definitely in Bangladesh this is new, that I can say. For example, I would think that mainly the mainstream media always had trouble of staffing resources. But with some leading media, with the resources that they have, they are now able to do these sort of activities, which is new, like major national level studies on child labor, on tobacco. That was really interesting for me to find that, and they are able to, because of their unique position, they are able to attract the key stakeholders and in their dissemination things. So they are in the right place to do that. So yeah.
Great. Stephen, I think I saw a hand up there. Did you have a comment or a question?
By accident.
Oh, by accident. Okay.
Can I put my hand up?
Yes, of course, Hans.
Again, thanks for that, and Enrique also. I thought interesting points there. I admit I was wondering whether the media can be put into two very broad typologies. And I understand those are ideal types and it's much more complicated, but that you have one type of media which you could describe as mission-driven. They have a particular mission and somehow that mission is secured financially. That can be sort of a public broadcasting model, it can be something that is in other ways insulates them, potentially a very rich business group that allows them to engage and drive a certain mission versus a profit-driven or business-driven model. And I do think that that ends up in two very different types, potentially different approaches to journalism. And again, I'm saying these are extreme versions and there's a lot of gray in between. But the profit-driven journalism typically will be desperate for content. I would think will be desperate for content and will try and get content extra cheap or as cheap as possible. And, we all saw that happening in the United Kingdom, where the moment that Murdoch took over the Times, you had much more coverage of what was happening in the courts because that was the cheapest form of journalism. You sent a journalist to sit in a court with a paper, with just taking notes, and then ultimately we filled a page with that rather than having to interview a gazillion people and do in-depth background research on a complex question. So I'm just wondering, would that, again, knowing that that's an extreme typology and that in reality it's a lot more murky in between, but would that approach make sense from what you've seen in Bangladesh? There's a type of media that's a bit more mission-driven and a type of media that's a bit more profit or business-driven?
Well, this distinction was not obvious for me because I interviewed individual journalists, and I suspect that many of the responses that I get are and media, at least in Bangladesh, tends to move around significantly across ideologies, across political orientation of the media. But this decision did not appear as strongly as it, as you think. No.
Well, that's good. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Okay. If there are no more questions, then I think we can wrap it up. That's coming up to an hour, and I realize everybody's busy.
I have one more question, if I may. Sorry.
Okay. Go ahead. Last chance.
Very, very specific question, Ahmed, because it turned up in Cape Town, and it's been raised a little bit by think tanks in South Asia. We've heard from some think tanks that they think that Twitter is for adolescents, so to speak. Twitter, nobody who's serious is on Twitter. So we've heard this opinion made, sort of voiced by some think tanks in South Asia. And I was just wondering at least from what we've heard conversely from some journalists in Africa, you cannot afford not to be on Twitter because, say, around elections or around special events, it's just the feed for tracking what's going on through the hashtags. What was your experience? And because you had said a little more broadly, social media, but Twitter is almost a slightly separate breed of that because it's a very separate type of environment of conversation. The journalists you talked to, was that an overwhelming theme, the importance to be on Twitter rather than just Facebook?
Absolutely. And this is the most strongly expressed opinion that I found, and it was striking because the internet accessibility rates in Bangladesh is low as 10%. But obviously, those people in the policy cycles, including media, are using internet extensively. And media, and again, I cannot emphasize the importance they placed on social media. Facebook, for example. I have around 50 friends who are journalists, and they are always on social media. And the social media, Facebook, for example, they use to share information with other journalist colleagues, but also to get news and information on what is interesting and what is happening. Twitter a little bit less so that I found, from the exchanges that I had with journalists. But Facebook definitely yes. Facebook yes, and this was strong and clear.
Great. Thanks.
Okay. So, Enrique or Stephen, any last burning questions or comments from your side?
And from me.
Yep. Great.
No, I would. I think I'll be there. But it'd be nice to get all the reports and the data, even if that's okay, to have a look at it.
Yes, the report is. I'm finalizing the report, the final report, which will have more information than my presentation, obviously. So maybe.
Great. Okay. So I'm going to
Sure.
send that into the participants.
And feel free to. I mean, I don't know how to do this, but I think I sent you, Kate, some of the links to the papers in Latin America, but happy to share more as well. So
that would be great. Thanks, Enrique.
All right, great. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Ahmed, especially for the really interesting presentation and the great discussion afterwards. And stay tuned for the next webinar on November 22nd, which will be a discussion on what a post-MDG development agenda might look like. So thanks, everyone, again, and have a great evening, day. Bye for now.
Okay, bye. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.